So, as I've told you before, the only real text of Hosea that we're going to dive into deeply is going to be the first 3 chapters. The first chapter and third chapter are relatively short. The second chapter we'll just kind of spend a Sunday flowing through the general ideas. So really we're only going to dig into the first and third chapters because this is kind of an introduction not just to the 12, but obviously to Hosea, which is why it comes first. So we're going to start this today, and we have to talk about the prophet's family as sign acts. That's what chapter 1 is about. Just to give you a big idea of really the first chapter's big idea is that Hosea, and by extension his wife and children, embody the message of Yahweh to Israel and the consequences for their apostasy. This is what we're going to talk about in detail. When we get to chapter 3, the negative representation of the children will be negated, flipped around, reversed by Yahweh's goodness when he redeems rebel Israel, woos her back to himself. So this is where we're going. Judgment and after judgment, through judgment, redemption. That's going to always be the pattern. You can be redeemed, but you're going to go through the consequences of your actions here. The consequences of Israel's apostasy is, of course, exile, but after exile, there will be redemption. So the harshness of chapter 1, and I mean, calling your only daughter unloved, heads up there, and then by the end of chapter 3, calling her loved, is going to paint the picture of all of this. So what I want to do is we're going to read all of chapter 1, including verse 2 of chapter 2, and then we'll dive into sign acts. So, verse 1 we've read before. The word of the Lord came to Hosea, son of Beeri, during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and during the reign of Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, king of Israel. When the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, "Go, marry a promiscuous woman and have children with her. For like an adulterous wife, this land is guilty of unfaithfulness to the Lord." So he married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim. She conceived and bore him a son. The Lord said to Hosea, "Call him Jezreel, because I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the massacre at Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of Israel. And that day I will break Israel's bow in the valley of Jezreel." Gomer conceived again, gave birth to a daughter. The Lord said to Hosea, "Call her Lo-ruhamah," which means not loved, for I will no longer show love to Israel, that I should at all forgive them. But I will show love to Judah, and I will save them, not by bow, sword, or battle, or by horses or horsemen, but I, Yahweh their Elohim, will save them. After she had weaned Lo-ruhamah, Gomer had another son. The Lord said, "Call him Lo-ami," which means not my people. For you are not my people, and I am not your Elohim. Yet the Israelites will be like the sands on the seashore, which cannot be measured or counted. In the place where it was said to them, "You are not my people," they will be called children of the living God. The people of Judah and the people of Israel will come together, and they will appoint one leader and come up out of the land, for great will be the day of Jezreel. Say to your brothers, "My people," and your sisters, "My loved ones." So, opening idea for the introductory script. The word of the Lord came to Hosea, son of Beeri. Just a couple of things that I haven't touched on here. The word of the Lord, or the word of Yahweh, is authorized representation. God is authorizing Hosea to speak in his name, which is something that kings did. They give you an official position and they make you their messenger. If you want to turn the air to cool or turn it down, if you guys are hot, turn the air down to where you want it, just FYI, because if you're not comfortable, I'd rather you be comfortable and paying attention, whatever that means for me. So he's authorizing, verse 1 is written to say, we believe Hosea is authorized to speak on behalf of God. And it's a very common thing in the ancient world. Gods didn't so much represent or anoint prophets the way that God does. They have more priests and oracles, and it's kind of the same thing, kind of not. But the point is that Hosea is authorized by Yahweh to speak his authoritative words. So The word of X, meaning the word of Yahweh here, authenticated a messenger as a representative sent from a higher authority. So the person who does the anointing, God, is the authority, and he invests authority into Hosea to speak on his behalf. This is very important. I'm going to talk about this during the sermon today because we're going to talk about Peter getting the keys to the kingdom of heaven and binding and loosing and what that does and / doesn't mean. And so God is always doing this. He's always anointing people and he's always investing them in authority to speak. A call to ministry is a call to say, I'm investing my authority in you and I expect you to do my will in my community. And it's not just in prophets, it's not just in ministers. He invests his authority in everybody in the end. We all share a portion of this. However, apostates don't get a share in this, so they're out and Hosea's in. So within the Israel of the Bible, not unlike today with churches, ideas vie for dominance. They want allegiance. They want you to believe their ideas and they want you to act in certain ways, right? They vie for dominance in our hearts, in our minds. They vie for our attention. This is what the same in the ancient world as it is today, except the ancient world didn't have computers in our pockets to distract us and try and sell us new ideas. So in some ways, it's even more drastic than back then. But in the ancient world, these ideas, some people would take Yahweh worship and try to make it compatible with worshiping other gods. We can worship Yahweh and we can worship Baal. These are kind of the main ideas we've already talked about. We can be God's people, but we can also align ourselves with Assyria. And on some level, that meant giving some deference to Assyrian gods. But they're going to try and do this. And so when you try to align worship of God or worship with Jesus with the worship of other gods, it's called syncretism. Let's synchronize our beliefs about Christianity with the worship of non-Christian gods, right? And obviously it breaks the covenant. Obviously it breaks your relationship with God. These themes, these motifs we've always talked about. Others would just go in the fully apostate way and say, we don't care about Yahweh or his law. We don't care about any of that. Let's just worship any God but Yahweh. You got to understand, both of these were happening in Israel during Hosea's day. Isaiah spells this out well in his first chapter. Remember, Isaiah, although coming slightly after Hosea in the timeline by like 10 or 15 years, is a contemporary to Hosea. Isaiah plays this out and he describes it like you're on your way to Yahweh's temple and you're worshiping all these other gods on the road there. He describes it that way. So both were going on. So in our hearts, in our minds, God is vying for sole loyalty, sole attention of your affections and desires. He wants to be that and he wants to be that alone. And he wants all your other attentions, desires, and things in life to actually be put in a proper place because we are vying for him. Israel's not doing that. Besides just the religious component, there's the political component, but just keep in mind, there's no such thing as a divorce between the church and the state. Not back then, not now. That you can't do that. But besides that, most people flip the intention of the separation between church and state, which is not a phrase in the Constitution, which is not a phrase in the Declaration of Independence. It's a phrase that comes from, I believe, John Adams in letters that he wrote. But he meant by it, I believe it was John Adams, if you actually read his letters where the phrase does appear, he clearly means that the state is not to be influencing the power or authority of the church. That they are supposed to live separately in the sense that the state cannot tell the church what to do. It was never meant to be flipped the other direction, where the church cannot tell the state what to do. In the 20th century, that's when that idea really caught hold. Didn't really originate there, but it caught hold, and now with the best of intentions, that idea vies for power. That idea vies for control. And with the best of intentions, I hear way too many preachers and teachers of the scripture say, well, the separation of church and state means we don't get involved in politics. That's a load of crap. Right. God is the God of politics as much as he is anything else. And just imagine what happens if you walk away from political institutions, and you say our Christianity is going to separate from this, and we're no longer going to fill these political roles. We're not going to have Christians in the House of Representatives and the Senate. We're not going to seek a Christian governor. We're not going to seek a Christian president. We're not going to seek Christians who are on the Supreme Court or anything. We're not going to seek any type of political role because we're going to be separate from that. Because the church is not the state, which is true, and doesn't need to be the state, fine. But we also don't need Christianity to influence the state. What happens when you do that? Pull Christian influence from Christian people out of those institutions. What happens when you pull a Christian influence out of an institution?
Chaos.
And in the end, it is chaos.
That's where it ends. Huh?
Things just are going to get worse because God's influence isn't there. You stopped fighting the war. You stopped saying, well, we don't need God to actually invade these territories. We'll just give them up to evil. And evil's going to be like, great job. And the idea of separation of church and state is a part of that. They want you to vie for the idea that as a Christian, you should not be in political places or speaking about political things. Here, one of the things that you can understand between the wars of Assyria, the Syro-Ephraimite war that's going on here, holy war and political war are the same war in the Bible. And I tell you, it is no different today. You cannot be on God's side and not eventually have God wanting you in some way, shape, or form to invade a space and say, that space is what I want. I want to be God in that space. Political space is no different. In this day, they didn't have a problem with that. It wasn't a conversation of should God or the gods be in political space. It was a question of which gods should be allowed to rule in that space. Which God is the king going to give his allegiance to, and therefore let that God invade that political space. Hosea is saying, my allegiance is to the Lord. God has authorized me to speak on his behalf. I don't want the Assyrian imperial war machine to get in the way of Israel's loyalty to Yahweh. Don't give your loyalty to military power represented by Assyria. Don't make alliances with them to get yourself out of trouble. Just trust the Lord. Judah's going to do this right, and Judah's going to be delivered from this, and we'll talk about that. But we read the verses just now about, I will no longer show love to the house of Israel, but I'll show love to Judah, and I'll save Judah. Not by bow or sword or shield or war horse, but by Yahweh their Elohim. If you're faithful to God, you can win battles, you can win wars. Spiritual warfare in the ancient world and regular warfare were the same thing, as they are today. Because, I mean, if your city gave up a Christian influence or something, or at least a Judeo-Christian ethic, the three biggest cities that reject Christian influences, populace-wise, in America are New York, Chicago, and L.A. And they are also not just the most liberal in their political, they're also the most chaotic and violent in their everyday, regular routines and stuff. There's a reason for that. If Christians don't get in there and start influencing people the way Hosea is trying to influence his culture for Yahweh, that is just going to be a repetitive pattern. Truth has to be spoken into the world that believes and clings to lies. God is empowering Hosea to speak his truth. So Yahweh wants his word to be in there competing amongst all of the ideas of Hosea's day and today. And it's not coming through political power. It's not coming through a pagan empire. It's coming through some dude. We don't even really know anything about the guy in the first verse. We don't know where he's from. We just know he's the son of Beeri, some guy from the northern kingdom. Who is this guy, and why should he be allowed to speak on Yahweh's behalf? And the only real answer is because Yahweh, who is the ultimate authority, anoints him to do this. There is a rhetorical goal within Hosea. Indeed, all of the 12, all of the prophets, all of the Bible to confront lies about Yahweh. You can't worship him and other gods at the same time, because that's not what it means to be his personal possession, his property, although we don't like that, his people, his community. You can't do this. And it will inevitably place the prophet on one side of the conflict with the communities and the cultures around him set against God and himself. So it's going to be Yahweh and Hosea against the people of Israel, and they're going to be fighting this out. You can't be a prophet or a minister and be risk averse. You can't avoid conflict. Conflict is necessary if you're going to stand for something, because the world around you, if you stand for Yahweh's truth, isn't going to like that. And they're going to try and shut you up, and they're going to try and silence you. And if you're going to try and play nice with it and say, okay, you don't want to hear it, okay, I guess I'll just stop talking, I'll just, retreat. And I won't say anything, and I'll be nice, and I won't bring it up again. All that's going to happen is you're going to lose the ability to have a civil conversation with somebody about it. And I think that's what is going on in Hosea. Rhetorical conflict is a primary point of being in the prophetic office. Rhetorical conflict is a primary part of spiritual warfare. Whether you're in ministry or not, you should engage in it on some level. This idea that, we're getting together and we're having a family dinner so nobody talk politics or anything, all that really happens when you retreat from that is to say, a whole generation of kids grow up never actually learning to engage in conversations with people having different ideas, and yet still sitting around the same table and having a meal with each other. All you do is learn that you can't have fellowship with people that have different ideas. It's the wrong message, and we have to change that. You have to find a way to say, okay, we need to learn to have civil discussion again about disagreements, things that we legitimately disagree on, sometimes in very deep levels and ideas. And we have to learn to be as calm, collected, and civil about it, even if somebody's going to yell in our face because they cannot handle somebody disagreeing with them. But they can learn if you can properly show them. Listen, I don't agree with you. These are the reasons why. I think these reasons are more truthful, more long-lasting than the ideas that you're calling for, the ideas that you've accepted. And I think human history has accepted these ideas for 5,000 years for good reason. And you're acting in this instance, this suggestion, you're kind of acting the way prophets like Hosea are meant to act. Just get in there and tell the truth. You don't have to be harsh about it, but maybe you need to. But you at least need to be as determined to plant your feet in the ground and saying, no, this is wrong, this is a lie, and I'm going to invade it, the space in your life that believes this lie, with the truth of God. And you're going to hear it out of my mouth. So you have somebody representing to you God's truth to the best of my ability, to the best that I know it. Hosea is trying to do that. He's trying to embody this in his life and ministry. But he's not the only one.
Why do you think God charged Hosea with not only representing him to the people of Israel, but he asked him to live out what he was speaking about?
Let me come to that, because
okay.
we are going to get to that. Why ask him to do this?
Right.
The things that he does. So a couple of things before we answer that question. Hosea's got a bit of a unique opening, not just because of the sign acts, but usually in a prophetic book, particularly in the Old Testament, the superscription leads to something different than what it does in Hosea. Normally, the word of Yahweh and the anointing of a prophet leads to spoken oracles, like in the way the book of Joel starts. Most of the prophets start this way. Sometimes it leads to the prophet's own commissioning right away, as in Jeremiah, and then they get to the actual messages and the oracles and stuff. Hosea alone, the superscription doesn't lead to that. It leads to prophetic sign acts. So to answer your question, let's talk about prophetic sign acts that open the book. It's really the entire first section, 1, 2 through 3, 5. This is your English number, and you'll find the numbering slightly different in Hebrew. So your chapter 1, Hosea marries Gomer. They have 3 kids. Chapter 2, you get this slight discourse on Yahweh's reaction. of Israel's treatment to himself. And then in chapter 3, we come back to Hosea's family. The life of Hosea, his reconciliation with Gomer. Time has passed, she's gone, and God says, go get him back. And then he says, let's invert the children's sign acts from chapter 1. Let's flip the messaging upside down. So, to summarize in Huang's word, the book of Hosea is unique for beginning with the prophet's story of estrangement and reconciliation, by providing literary bookends around Yahweh's direct speech, that's chapter 2. Hosea's experiences are living proof of Yahweh's covenantal commitment to his people and the rest of creation.
That's the why right there. The covenantal.
Good. So that should help you answer the question, what is a sign act? So that's not a rhetorical question. What is a sign act? What is a prophetic sign act? Tell me. What?
Covenantal commitment?
What
you mean? Or what Hosea was doing?
More like what Hosea is doing, yeah. Just describe it to me. What is a prophetic sign act? Because they're everywhere in the Bible. Prophets be doing this.
So Hosea wasn't the only one that was asked to do this?
Correct. No, well, he's the only one who God says go marry a woman who's explicitly promiscuous. But he's not the only one who's called to do sign acts.
Okay.
And but what is a sign act in its most basic term?
It's basically a physical representation of a prophetic, that's like, this is what's going to happen. It's a demonstration, like a physical metaphor, essentially.
A physical metaphor? I like that. A demonstration.
There eventually.
You're absolutely right. I want you to embody the message. I want you to become the physical representation. Your life and everything about your day-to-day existence, and sometimes it's for a period of time, is going to become the message. So I've worded it like this. The prophet, or sometimes extensions of the prophet, like his family, become the embodiment of the message, either acting out the message through obscure means, or else transforming their own life to become the living embodiment of the metaphysical reality related to them and revealed to them by God. So,
Would
God
Paul have been a sign act? I'm sorry. I'm just trying to put pieces together.
In a way, here's the thing. In a way, everything we do ought to be a living embodiment of the reality. So I don't want you to take it too far in thinking that every little thing that everybody did qualifies as a sign act.
Okay.
Because in a very real way, anything could qualify as a sign act. But this is typically God reveals something very specific, a very intentional message, and he says, I want you to embody this particular message. A good example of this is Ezekiel. In chapters 4 and 5, he does a lot of weird stuff. He's not the only one, but he does a lot of different sign acts. He binds himself in cords and lays on his side, and the text says he lays on his side for like 370-something days. I forget how long. And then he turns around and is on the other side for like 5 or 6 days, for a short amount of time. I don't remember. He builds this like scale model of Jerusalem in the dirt and the sand, and then he just like rails over it and knocks the whole thing down like a child playing with his toys. He has to cook food on dung instead of coal-based fire, and he's like, God, I don't want to do that. Can I use something else? And I think he's told to do it with his own human fecal matter. He's like, can I at least use animal fecal? I forget what it is, but God says, yes, you don't have to do it. If it's too disgusting, do it as disgusting as you can handle, and God says that's fine. But it's a really disgusting thing regardless. And then at one point, at the end of it, he just takes all of his hair and throws it in the air, and he's like, "Ka!" He's like, this is what's going to happen to Jerusalem. Yeah, and this little remnant that's going to have to survive the initial attack is going to get thrown in the air. Yeah! He's trying to act out the message of exile. Sign acts are employed when people become too numb to mere words. For example, Hosea 7, the birth of Emmanuel, these prophecies, in context of, it's in the context of actually the Syro-Ephraimite war that's happening. Assyria's marching along, and Ahaz is still king, and Israel in the north and Ephraim and Syria, not Assyria, Syria, have made this political alliance that say we're going to try and fight off the Assyrian war machine. Judah, you're a cousin to Israel. You should join us and add your army to our army, and we can win this. And Isaiah tells Ahaz, pick a sign. Pick a sign. God will give you whatever sign that you want so that you, a crappy king, can trust him with full certainty that you don't need to join this coalition and fight this battle. Isaiah says, no, I'm not going to trust Yahweh. I'm not going to do it. So as Isaiah says, fine, God himself will give you a sign. A woman will conceive and give birth to a son, and we'll call him his name Emmanuel, meaning God with us. And before the boy is even old enough to understand the difference between right and wrong, this army that you're so worried about, this battle and stuff, isn't going to be happening anymore. That's the original context for Emmanuel. And Matthew is reading that of saying there's a greater understanding of God being with his people. And as we're under Roman political domination and all our people are still in exile, the real exodus to come is now coming through this baby born in a manger here. That's the real deliverance. It's something greater than merely the sign act. So that the boy, Emmanuel, the historical boy, is to be a living sign to Ahaz. We don't really know, is he Isaiah, one of Isaiah's kids? Because he seems to call his wife a prophetess, which may just mean that's how he identifies her, as the wife of a prophet. It may mean she prophesied in her own right. We don't know. But he seems that Isaiah's own kids throughout the story are living sign acts to the throne of Judah. So it's a possibility that Emmanuel was originally Isaiah's own kid. And that he would be coming and going to growing up because Isaiah seems to be somehow related to the throne because he comes and goes into the king's courts at will. It seems that like he would be bringing his kids as sign acts and saying, look, Emmanuel's growing up. Have you had to go to war against these people? I mean, he's there every day as a living reminder to Ahaz of the message that Ahaz doesn't need to worry about these people. So Isaiah does it, Ezekiel does it, Hosea does it, Elijah and Elijah will do these in their own way, but they're usually specific actions designed for specific reasons, to embody a specific message. So beginning with him, that is Hosea, the Old Testament prophets often embody the persuasive goal of reaching Yahweh's people in times when their faith has become too jaded to accept more traditional methods of communication. This is why the prophets do weird stuff. This is why God calls Hosea to do something weird. Go marry a woman who's going to cheat on you. Whatever that means. And we'll talk about that on a different day. So I liken this to a modern example. Batman. Have you ever seen Batman Begins when Bruce Wayne is coming back to civilization? He gets on the plane with Alfred. He's talking this out. He says, he's talking about going back to Gotham and stuff. People need dramatic examples to shake them out of apathy. And I can't do that as Bruce Wayne, as a man. As a man, I'm flesh and blood. I can be ignored. I can be destroyed. But as a symbol, I can be incorruptible. I can be everlasting. So he's trying to work out the same thing. How do I become something more than just a person telling people what to do? How do I embody justice and goodness in Gotham? Because they need something more than just the message. It's like nobody in Gotham fails to understand the message. They all get it. But they need a better example, a more drastic example. And that's what sign acts are designed to do. Another way that you could look at it is sometimes like these sign acts in Hosea 1, sometimes the sign acts are just to be an ongoing message. Somebody's going to continue being a representative of this message, whether they know it or not. And that's the interesting thing. So there are 4 sign acts. First, Hosea's marriage to Gomer is a living embodiment of Israel's relationship to Yahweh. That shouldn't be much of a question in that. I like this picture. It's supposed to be of Hosea and Gomer, the 3 kids that they're going to have, because Gomer just doesn't have the nicest look on her face. So her relationship and her attitude is Israel's attitude. She's not even volunteering to be a sign act. God's turning her into one. Hosea's turning her into. Your relationship to me means you are a living embodiment to this. the relationship to our kids means they're living embodiments of this. So Jezreel is the first son. She's the second sign act. Lo Ruhamah is the only daughter. She's the third sign act and the second kid. And the third and final kid is the fourth sign act, Lo Ami. Each of the children are the living sign acts. They didn't sign up for this any more than Emmanuel did. But that's how it works. Any questions on sign acts? And Carla, I hope that by now that answers your question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I love that. Now I'll be looking for it everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean,
It exists everywhere. For instance, it's not just prophets. Priests are supposed, as they're ministering in the temple and the tabernacle area, are the living embodiment of the relationship between Yahweh and Israel, between sharing a meal with God and sharing a meal with his people. And they embody what it means to be Yahweh's people. So everything that they were to act out in their religious institution in the tabernacle and temple times means that they were supposed to be, while they were on duty working, the living embodiment or sign acts, if you will, of the relationship between Israel and his people. They're Israelites, so they're representing Israel to God, but they're also representing God to the Israelites. And so that's an important aspect of this. Acting out and embodying the picture and the truth, the metaphysical realities, was the whole point of why God created a physical universe anyways. He wanted his non-physical reality about himself and his non-physical family, the celestials, to actually be represented in physical means. So he gave physical representation to image bearers, humans, and said, you're my image bearers. Anywhere you go, people should see and understand me. But then we rebel. And so when you're called back to God on some level, you're called to embody what it means to relate to God. This is the idea of the priesthood of the believers, that everybody is supposed to gain access to God, not just the priest in an official capacity. When we are at our best, people can look at us and see that we are signs pointing to him. And that's a great thing. You want to strive to build and construct your life in a disciplined, orderly manner so that people can look at it and see you representing something. And as we fail, we have to bring our failures in and deal with our failures in such a way that even they, as we properly work through our sins and our failures, can point back to God, and that he is a good God who forgives his people. Hosea in chapter 3 is going to embody that aspect of the message by remarrying Gomer to a lesser extent, if that's even the right way to say it. Okay, so this is all just the introduction to getting into verse 2. When the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, go marry a promiscuous woman, have children with her, for like an adulterous wife, this land is guilty of unfaithfulness to the Lord. So Hosea has to embody the relationship and the emotional punch of the Yahweh-Israel relationship. I want you to marry a woman who doesn't seem to like you or want to be your wife. I want you, Hosea, to feel what it's like to be me in relationship to Israel. I want you to understand where I'm coming from here, so that you, as my authorized speaker, can express how I feel because of Israel's actions towards me, treating me this way. So I want you to go engage in a relationship where you're going to be treated badly, regardless of how good you are to this woman.
Do you think Hosea had a bit of a conversation with God based on that?
I'd be surprised if he didn't.
Right.
I don't know if he did, but I'd be surprised if he didn't.
And I don't think that would have insulted God to have that conversation with him.
I don't think so either.
You'd be like,
yeah, God can handle the,
right.
Wait a second, Lord, you want me to do what?
Right.
Side of the conversation.
Right.
Now, it skips that. I can't imagine
right.
that it didn't happen, but I don't know that it did.
Right.
Hosea may have said, all right, that's what God said, let's just go do it. And for all we know, that's how things work. But regardless, in the end, he does what God wants. And so it's not really a necessary part of the conversation.
Right. Just curious, though.
Because he just acts on
right.
what God says.
And so often we see that. We don't have a bit of the background that
yeah.
I always feel is part of my conversation with God when I think He's asking me to do something that I am not equipped
Sure.
to do.
But that's how. Nobody's equipped for marriage when they get married. Nobody. I don't care how old you are or how ready you think you are. You're not ready for marriage.
Right.
You just have to get married and then in your commitment,
Right.
work your commitment out and figure out what this is going to actually mean between the two of you.
Which is why this is really such a perfect example of a sign act, right?
Yeah.
Because even through, all through the relationship of God to His people, from the beginning of Genesis to the end of Revelation, it is about a relationship.
Yes.
Marriage relationship.
Yeah, and that's why God institutes marriage. It was
Right.
His idea.
Right.
He wanted it, and He wanted it between, and let me explain it to you like this. He wanted it between a man and a woman. Why? Why does He want that? Why does He say your union, your sexual relationship, which is also my idea and I'm giving to you, is going to actually create new image bearers? Right? Why does He give His stamp of approval on heterosexual sex to be a creation act? That intimacy. Let me explain it to you like this. There is nothing more like a man in the world than a woman. But a woman is fundamentally not a man. You cannot treat your wife or your sister or your mother or any friends you have who are female like they're your bro and like they're your drinking buddy. They're not. And God didn't want that kind of relationship. He wanted men to fill a certain role, so He gave them a physical characteristic to embody that role. And He gave women different physical characteristics and different physical capabilities to embody a different role. And when they come together and they're actually living life together, which is what marriage is. Marriage is not two people in two lives. It's two people sharing one life. Two people who are fundamentally human, but fundamentally not the same, because sharing that one life is the living embodiment, is the living sign act between a relationship between God and a person. God is, there is nothing more fundamentally like God in this world that we live in than a human person. But a human person is fundamentally not God. And so we play a different role in our relationship with God, even while we carry His authority, exercise His authority in the world. Our right in the world to use His authority is not to decide for Him what things are going to be like, what good and evil is. The fundamental rebellion in Genesis 3 is, okay, God, we're going to usurp your role in this relationship. Instead of letting you, who have made this wonderful world for us, decide what good and evil is so that we can go on enjoying it, we'll just kick you off the throne and decide for ourselves. And the tension inherent in marriage is to say, who's going to make the decisions? Who's going to decide things? Well, I have this opinion, I have that opinion, and you've got to work that out amongst equals, because neither one of you is in the place of God. But at the same time, God puts responsibility for the good of the family and the household on both spouses, but He goes to men first and say, you are first and foremost responsible for the good of your house, which is why He goes to Hosea and why He will go back to Hosea in chapter 3 and say, go fix the relationship. Why? Because I'm going to fix this relationship between me. Go take the initiative and see this done, because I'm going to take the initiative and see this done between me and my people. Marriage itself is the fundamental picture in all cultures and humanity between the relationship of God and His people. And a man and his wife is the fundamental picture of a God and a person. You have to embody that. And if you're thinking about it, the physical roles that you play in sex are a physical embodiment of it. Sex is a sign act. The man plays his role, the woman plays her role. And if you play your roles correctly, you can create new image bearers. You can have a blessing beyond anything. Not just the intimacy between you, but a continuous blessing in the form of a child. The ancient world understood this, which is why it's only in the modern age of modern feminism that says and shares a message vying for our attention and our focus that says men and women are completely the same. There's no difference between them. There's not fundamentally different. Anything a woman can do, a man can do. I was like, that's going too far. And nobody's happy with that. We've built an entire culture and structure on that, and nobody's happy because nobody knows what their role is in relation to the other person. Nobody knows. I mean, we know, but we're trying to fight what we know and understand. That's not, the role of the woman is not to be this in sex. The role of the woman in sex is different from the role of the man. To describe it in a way that I once heard a preacher describe it euphemistically, about the mechanics of heterosexual sex, the man has to rise to the occasion. The woman has to open herself up and let him in. That's the fundamental embodiment. God has to rise to the occasion. A man must rise to the occasion. And a woman has to say, I accept your strength. I accept your manhood into it. And it's more of an active, passive, ongoing relationship. If you play that out, not only is it supposed to be a lot of fun and a lot of closeness and intimacy, but you get children out of that, and it's the only way you can create kids. Today, the message is anything a woman can do, a man can do. That's not exactly right, because you cannot play a role in sex that will create new image bearers. You say, it doesn't matter. We've got science. We can put our eggs on ice, or we can do this, or we can do all of that. Is that really what you want, even if you can? Is that really better than what God is offering you? Even if you play a role that you are being told you should play the role He's playing, that you should be in control and you should have power and dominance, which is not what He actually is given by God anyways. It's just dumb. It's mismanaging. And that all is vying for our attention, and you can be a living embodiment of this, which is why the New Testament says, men, love your wives, women, respect and submit to your husband, because he's playing a different role than what you are to play. But it means, guys, you're going to have to play your dadgum roles, for crying out loud. I mean, come on. Men are so passive and lazy these days.
Which was part of the problem that brought on feminists. I mean,
yes,
it's a circular problem.
And it always has been.
Right.
I think feminism actually, in like the late 1800s, turn of the 1900s, actually had great points of saying, why can't we vote? Are we people? Or do we just tell our husband what we want and they go vote or something? Why can't we have the vote? I mean, that was the original thing of feminism. Feminism actually kicks itself off because of the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
The Industrial Revolution made the things that women were doing at home in both agriculturally with farming, but also like needlepoint and stuff, providing clothes for their family, providing for the daily needs. Women were doing that in the home, and then the Industrial Revolution and the assembly line just mass-produced everything, and women were like, well, what do we do now? Feminism was designed to try and answer those questions. And I think although they started off with great motives, great reasoning, and great ideas, somewhere along the line, as always happens, they went too far.
And then war exacerbated.
And we're living through that.
Fighting. Women have to create bullets and guns. Yeah.
It's like anything anything a person can do, a woman can do, right? But there are some things that men can do that women can't. There's some things that women can do that men can't. And they're pretty much biologically related, which is why biology is under attack, because it fundamentally at least puts a limitation, if not undermines the idea that a woman can do anything a man can do. Once you start realizing that's not entirely true, you either have two options. You either ask questions, okay, what can't I do? Or you have to throw the baby out with bathwater and say, nope, double down on it and keep going. Our society is in that doubling down point. All right, a couple more things, and then I'm going to end right here so I've got time before the service starts. So, Hosea's marriage and his children must embody the harlotry of Israel. We're going to talk about that next week. His primary message to the people is that you're a bunch of whores, right? Hosea will do more than speak the message. He will live the divine message. The message is the land commits heinous harlotry. I'll talk about why I like this. This is Wang's translation. Heinous harlotry and walking away from Yahweh. So Gomer will walk away from Hosea as Israel walked away from God. And God wants Hosea to feel this. As much as it's going to hurt Hosea, I want you to understand the way that I feel in this relationship. Each of the children represent the coming effects of Israel's heinous harlotry or apostasy. Jezreel represents that the land will dissipate from Israel's control. Lo Ruhamah, that the divine presence is going to dissipate, leave Israel. That's something in Ezekiel. when it leaves Judah. The divine presence gets up, stands at the temple. Hosea can see it because he's got eyes to see. Everybody else is just walking right past it. So the presence of God gets up and moves into the hills, and nobody even notices. Hosea's like, he's out there, he's not even in the temple anymore. Because he's taken this tour of the temple, and he's seen how people are worshiping all these other gods in the temple. No longer in Hosea's day on the way to the temple. In the temple, they're actually worshiping all these other gods. And then finally, the presence of God just wanders off. And here, Lo Ruhamah is representing that to Israel. God's presence is leaving this land. Lo Ami, when God's presence is gone, your identity as Israel and the people of God is gone, obviously. So these are the big pictures for the 3 sign acts. And as is common with sign acts, once the sign is given or performed, the meaning of the sign is also given and performed. So this is chapter 1 and what chapter 1 is going to be about. So next week we're going to start with Jezreel. We'll start with the sign act, and we'll see how many of the sign acts we can get through next week.